we have decided to field a total slate of 14 candidates for the general election.
Why should young voters consider supporting or voting for the People's Alliance for Reform?
If the PAP policies are allowed to go on, and if they are unchecked, you are going to find life increasingly difficult for you. I'm not beating my own drum. You need to have very outspoken opposition politicians.
What would Singapore stand to gain if the PAR is in Parliament?
For the last 20, 30 years, our value as a Singapore citizen has been diluted. So many Singaporeans today feel that they are second-class citizens in their own country. We must take back what we have lost over the years.
Welcome back to Political Prude's GE2025 special, where we're creating content that helps all of us get ready to vote. We wrote to every party to invite them to our show to give us, the young voters, a proper introduction to their party, to understand who they are, what they stand for, and what their plans for Singapore look like. This episode's a little bit different. We're getting to know an opposition alliance called the People's Alliance for Reform, or PAR. In Singapore, there's been a push for opposition parties to team up, and PAR is one of those efforts. It started with 4 parties but now has 3 after one dropped out earlier this year. Joining us today at Political Prude is Mr. Lim Tean, the Secretary General of PAR and founder of member party People's Voice. Let's roll. Mr. Lim Tean, welcome to Political Prude, the podcast.
Joel, thank you so much for inviting me to your great program. You know, it's a great privilege for me to be here and to be talking to you and your very professional crew and the audience you have.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to have our conversation today, and I want to start with the primer for everyone, right? Because not everybody can understand what an alliance is. Can you explain to everybody what the PAR is and how it is different from a traditional just one party itself?
Joe, thank you. And I think that is a great question. Not many people in Singapore understand the significance of a proper alliance. All right. Now, what has happened in the last 2 years in Singapore is this. 4 parties: People's Voice, which I founded; the Reform Party, which was founded by the great J.B. Jeyaretnam and is now helmed by his son, Kenneth Jeyaretnam; another party called the Democratic Progressive Party, and there was another party called the People's Power Party, came together to form the People's Alliance for Reform, or PAR, as we the short form for it. Now, what is different about PAR is this. PAR is a political entity that enables the 4 parties, when it comes to election time, to form a combined team in a GRC. So, for example, if you take Tanjong Pagar GRC, which we are going to contest in this election, you can have candidates from Reform Party, PV, DPP come together, all right, to form the team. Now, of course, in an SMC, a single-member constituency, you can't have a combination. That's a single-member seat. So it will still be whether it's an RP candidate or a PV candidate. But for this election, we are fighting as a unit. There is no more RP or PV or DPP. It is just PAR, all right? And we actually also have a new outfit, which we put on yesterday for the very first time. Now, about a month and a half ago, PPP left the alliance, all right? So we are now an alliance of 3 parties. Now, people have been confused in the last 2 years because there was another so-called alliance or coalition, they called themselves, that formed, that consisted of 4 parties: Red Dot United, RDU; NSP, my old party, the National Solidarity Party; SUP, the Singapore United Party; and the fourth one, I'm sorry, it just slipped my mind. 4 parties came together. They called themselves the coalition, but unlike us, they are not a formal alliance. So they are not able to fight in a combined team. So in a GRC, when it comes to election time, they are unable to have the members of NSP, RDU, SUP come together. All right? They will have to fight individually. So in a sense, that is a loose alliance, but it is not a proper legal alliance. I'm so sorry. The last party is the Singapore People's Party. So I hope I have explained quite clearly.
Yes, you have. And my question really then is, when it comes to branding, of course, you want your own party to have, recognizability, or people to be able to, build a relationship with that brand. So what is the benefits of joining an alliance versus, putting your resources to focus on building, for example, in your case, the PV's brand?
Yes, well, I think the response is this. When we set up PAR, the hope really was for some parties to come together to be the forerunner, because we had taken note of Singaporeans' desire for opposition unity. Singaporeans, by and large, think that there are too many political parties in the scene. So we thought, let's be the forerunner. Let's combine together the four parties. We had actually invited many other parties, including RDU, SPP, and all that, to come together in an alliance. But in the end, only the four of us went ahead. So that was the main purpose, that we would create some form of opposition unity and in time to come grow that alliance. Now, Joel, I am the first one to say, and I want to hopefully disabuse Singaporeans, that the way forward is for us to have just a two-party or a three-party system, which, I read from many comments on social media are what people are expressing. Now, they take the example of Britain and America, all right? But the modern world is more complex than that. The two-party system is a historical episode. All right, it was born out of the British parliamentary system from a few hundred years ago. At that time, there were two great parties, known as the Tories and the Whigs. And then over the years, when you came to the 20th century, you had then the two great parties, the Conservatives and the Labour Party, which is the party of government today. But Britain has moved on. Today, if you look at the British parliamentary system, it is not just Labour and Conservatives. You have the Lib Dems, the Liberal Democrats. You now have Nigel Farage's Reform Party, which is going to be a big force in the coming years. And then, because Britain is not one country, Britain is a combination of four separate entities: England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. And then you have another quite formidable force known as the Scottish National Party. So I hope the audience will understand. As we move forward in this century, you have to expect that the two-party system is going to be a historical item. Historical. If you look at Europe today, what do you see? You see a multitude of parties in any democracy. You see in Germany or in the Scandinavian countries, they have a multitude of parties. And they work with it, and they make it work well, because there they have a system known as proportional representation. All right? And so you may have 5% of the votes in a general election, or 10%, but you get some seats. And the people you represent actually have a voice in parliament. And I am a huge advocate of proportional representation, because I think that is the best way to reach out to every person in the country. It should not just be that the majority have all the say in parliament and the minority are shut out, which is what is happening in Singapore now with our first past the post system, which of course was a development of the British system. I want very quickly also to touch on the other great example, which is often brought up, America. Of course, there you have the Republicans and the Democrats. But do not forget, in the last 20 years or the last 30 years, there have been instances of offshoots. like the Tea Party and all that. And I can foresee that in the coming years, there will be breakaways from the Democrats and in particular the Republicans. America is not going to be a two-party system for very much longer.
All right, big statements there, and I think we can go into that later on in our conversation. But first, what I want to ask is, how does the PAR actually differentiate themselves from the rest of the parties? Because when we look at the opposition parties, a lot of Singaporeans do say, oh, the opposition as one blanket category, right? But if you look at the different parties in detail, you can actually see differences of each one. So how would you point out the PAR's unique selling points, as we would say, the USPs?
I would put it this way. I think PAR's uniqueness, and we are actually quite different from the other opposition parties. You know, in Singapore, there has been a fear over the years, and there has been a fear of being branded as an extremist, or that you're not middle ground, or that you're not moderate. And so what you see in Singapore with the opposition parties is that they all tend to congregate, all right? They try to be very middle ground, yeah? And I don't like to say this. I'm not criticizing any of my colleagues in the opposition camp, but everyone tries to sound so reasonable. Everyone tries to sound so moderate because of this fear of being branded as a populist or as an extremist. PAR is different because we think that the great difficulty in Singapore today is that for the last 20, 30 years, our value as a Singapore citizen has been diluted. And that is why in this election, our slogan is take back what belongs to you. I can give you so many examples, Joel, why we are frustrated on behalf of the Singapore people with what has happened in the last 2 decades, especially under Lee Hsien Loong's leadership. All right. That was a tragic period in our political history, and I think history will not be kind to him. What has happened is that in the last 20 years, there has been a huge influx of foreigners, the immigration problem. Now, we are not against foreigners, but we just think that net immigration has been a disaster for Singapore when it comes to the numbers. Why is it a disaster? It is a disaster because indigenously born Singaporeans have been replaced or displaced in the workforce. Lee Hsien Loong's policies encourage what I would call labor arbitrage. It encouraged employers to prefer hiring foreigners to Singaporeans. And that is wrong. You cannot run a country like that. All right? If there's any value to being a citizen of a country, it is that your government must protect you. Not feed you, but it must make sure that, at least you have the priority to jobs. We, as a small country, we cannot be this place where other countries, larger countries, can export their unemployment to us, which is what has been happening. The Ministry of Manpower refuses to acknowledge that. The language that has been coming out of the government for the last 20 years has been highly misleading when it says foreigners create jobs for Singaporeans. In fact, the evidence is totally to the reverse. And I give you another example why Singaporeans should feel frustrated about discriminated against. Every young Singapore man at the age of 18 goes into the army, takes up arms. All right? After his 2 years in the army, during my generation, I served 2.5 years. He has reservist obligations for 13 cycles, I think probably till the age of 40. My reservist obligation was till the age of 50. But now he's told that new citizens who come in and who are aged 30 and above do not have national service obligations. Why? a person who is 31, 32 is fit enough to do national service. In fact, if you go to the Ukrainian war now, on the front line, the Ukrainian soldiers fighting on the front line, their average age is 45 and above. So, and that is a big discrimination against locally born Singaporeans because, you are losing out in the workplace. All right. And it also, because when you have reservist obligations, now your employers are starting to look at you askance and with disfavor. And he's saying, well, if I hire a foreigner, I'm not going to have that problem. So these are issues, Joel, that any right-thinking government, any government that is for the people, must take into consideration. It cannot always be figures, numbers, profits, and GDP all the time. There is a responsibility to your citizens that you must take care of. And I think in PAR, we have been very strong about that. And we are the only party that is against what we call unfair, fair trade policies. They are not even free trade policies. And the main one being SECA, which is the comprehensive economic treaty that we have with India that allows 127 professions in Singapore to be opened up to foreign Indian workers. And, the evidence when you talk to people on the streets is just horrendous. How many Singaporeans have been displaced by foreign Indians? We are not against them, but we are saying that you must be fair to the Singaporean.
I understand. When it comes to being fair, then what does that look like, right? So, for example, if you're mentioning the reservist condition, will that then be that, whoever we bring in should be obliged to do reservist? What else can that look like in terms of fairness?
I think certainly new citizens not born in Singapore who become Singapore citizens must do their fair share of national service. All right. If you think that they are not medically fit to be in the military, there must be other national service that they can do. All right. It can be desk-bound, but there must be some form of national service. Everything must be equalized. I think it was 2 years ago that Lim Tean, the then defense minister, gave a statement in Parliament, which I thought was outrageous as to why there was this differentiation. He said, Singapore youth, they have enjoyed all the benefits of our society in terms of education and all that. So they have to do national service. But then that burden is not placed on the new citizen. That is an outrageous statement because why do people choose to come to Singapore to be new citizens? Because they see something good in our society. All right. And this society has been built up by locally born Singaporeans and their forebears. All right. And I think it is not unfair to ask new citizens to bear their share of the burden of defending our country.
What kind of voter or, Singaporean do you think that the PAR will resonate the most with?
Joel, I hope that we can resonate with all age groups in Singapore. We do not differentiate. But allow me to say this. Your audience of political prude, I would say the Gen Zs and the millennials, probably from 21 to 45 years old, or thereabouts, they are an increasingly important segment of the electorate. If my figures are right, and it is difficult to get precise figures because they are not published, but this age group will constitute about 40% of the total electorate. So you can imagine, they are critical. All right, they are critical. And this is also the segment of the population that is now incredibly hard-pressed by disastrous PAP policies of the last 20 years. And what are these? I can quickly name you. Number one, the cost of living, as every politician who comes onto your program will tell you. All right. We are now the most expensive city in the world. But Joel, we in Singapore are actually not a high-wage country. We are not. I think about 35% or thereabouts of our workforce actually take home less than 2,400 a month. And in this incredibly expensive city, I always say to my friends, I take my hats off as to how Singaporeans actually survive. The second thing is, if you look at HDB prices, if you look at public housing prices, they have really reached ridiculous levels. We now have the most expensive public housing in the world. That never used to be the case. All right. Why did it happen? I would like to go into a little bit of history about this. Until about the mid-90s, public housing was incredibly affordable for every Singaporean because the mission of HDB was to give a roof over every Singaporean's head. And then Goh Chok Tong, the second Prime Minister of Singapore, had his asset enhancement scheme. He turned the HDB into virtually a casino for speculation, for profit-making, because he wanted to uplift Singaporeans, make Singaporeans rich in less than a generation. Yes, he made many Singaporeans rich, but the result, disastrous result, is that today's youth in Singapore find that HDB prices are beyond reach. Many of them, all right? You know, I think it was less than 3 years ago when HDB prices first crossed the $1 million mark. And now, less than 3 years later, they're fast approaching 2 million. And when I go around the young estates like Bidadari and Alkaf in Potong Pasir SMC, and I ask the young fathers there, what is your concern for your children? You know, one of the main concerns they tell me is, I'm concerned how they're going to afford housing in future. Look at my apartment now. I live in a relatively expensive apartment because Bidadari is not cheap, all right? But he says, I can see with my own eyes that every resale apartment here is over $1 million. How are my children going to afford that? You know, so I think that is a main concern. And that is something which we must address and which we must bring down. The PAP has no solution to that. The PAP will tell you that, oh, it's affordable because, you know, we still give out massive grants. That doesn't make it affordable. That means that it is not affordable, except the government has to give you subsidies so that you can actually buy something. Yeah. But again, don't forget, your parents used to take 20 years to pay off their HDB flat. Today, you're more likely to be taking 30 years to pay off that flat.
Hi, we'll get back into the episode shortly, but do me a favor. Consider sharing this episode with a friend by posting it on your IG story and tagging us at @politicalprude. It takes 2 seconds, but it actually makes a huge, huge difference in getting more people to discover our conversations. All right, let's get back into it. If PAR has representation in Parliament, what are some of the key things that you guys will push for or bring up in Parliament?
You will see in our manifesto, or what we call our contract with Singapore for GE2025, 5 main areas we want to concentrate on. First of all, cost of living. Second is making public housing affordable again. Number 3 is giving priority to Singaporeans for jobs. Number 4 is to curb or to reduce net immigration because we have too many foreigners coming into Singapore today. And number 5, we want some institutional reforms. I will not have time on this program to go through every one with you, but one of our signature proposals, and probably something that Singaporeans have never heard before in their lives, is this. We want free education, free school meals, free healthcare for every Singaporean child. Why do we want that? You know, Singapore has a disastrous total fertility rate now of 0.97. The PAP have no solutions, all right? For decades now, the TFR has been plunging. You take last year, which was a dragon year. And you know, usually with the Chinese in a dragon year, there's a baby boom, right? There was no baby boom last year. It didn't move at all. All right. You may have had 300 additional births, but that was all. If we continue down this path, we are going to become extinct as a people quite soon. The PAP's only solution is to import more foreigners, all right, to make up the numbers and to grow the population, as they say. Two things here. Despite 25, 30 years of bringing in foreigners, our TFR have not improved. So even the new citizens, have not been contributing to the TFR, all right? And there comes a point in time when the consequence of you bringing in so many people who are not indigenous to a country is that you are going to have social tension. You're going to have social fracture. All right. And this was something that Lee Kuan Yew, the founder of the PAP himself, acknowledged years ago, but which his successors appear to have forgotten. And I think it is dangerous as a society for us to carry on down this path. We must reverse our disastrous TFR. And I think giving free education, free healthcare, free school meals would be a great incentive to every young Singaporean parent to have more children. Because when we speak to young Singaporean couples, that is one of the main things they tell us. You know how much it costs to put my child in childcare. Even with the subsidies, if you have two, it can cost you well over $1,000, $2,000. That is a big chunk of the disposable income. All right? And it is right that we give every Singaporean child free education up to university. I'm not just talking about secondary or what. I want free education up to university for every Singaporean child because we have world-class universities here. All right? We should have Singaporean children in those universities making up the huge numbers. Right now, there are huge numbers of foreign students, especially in the graduate programs. All right? You go to our Singapore universities, they'll tell you, oh, most of the graduate students here are foreigners. Why? Why should that be the case? And then when, in this increasingly sophisticated economy of ours, I don't listen to the PAP politicians who tell you, oh, it's not so important to have a degree and all that. I'm not looking down on non-degree holders because they are incredibly important and everyone has a path in life. But having a degree, I think, is a great start to life. Because having a degree, teaches you in a lot of ways where to look for the necessary information. Okay? So I want free education for that Singaporean child. I want free healthcare for that Singaporean child because, again, that is a big worry for every Singaporean parent. What if my child gets sick? Do I have the income, to meet his medical needs and all that? And Joe, that also dovetails with our philosophy in PAR that we must work towards universal free healthcare for every Singaporean. That is the hallmark of every civilized society. Singaporeans pay so much every year towards MediSave and all these other insurance programs. And yet, so many of them are frustrated that despite having to fork out so much money, every time they go to the hospitals or what, they still have to come up with a cash component. That must stop. And we have the money. As I keep telling Singaporeans, do not be misled by the PAP narrative that is raiding the reserves. That is irresponsible fiscally, because even right now, we have the monies to provide free healthcare and free education for every Singaporean.
All right. Your point is we do have the money. And I guess for me, when I think about governance, it's about allocation of resources, right? And we understand that obviously there's a limit to that amount. So what are some of the trade-offs if we implement this plan, for example?
Joel, you see, I treat the budget, all right, this way. The budget, the national budget, is no different from the budget that a housewife gets, all right, every month or every week. And with that budget, the housewife has to decide what type of food she wants to put on the dinner table for the family. So our national budget, we have to decide what type of society we want to build. Now, the type of society the PAP has built over the years has become a very mean society, where there is hardly any social safety net, where the ultimate aim always is more profits. And as a result, you see the social inequality in Singapore today is incredible. I don't like to talk about GDP per capita because that is meaningless to me. When you have 35% of the workforce or thereabouts taking home less than 2,400 a month, how can you have one of the highest GDPs per capita in the world? It's physically not possible unless you then factor in the wealth of the billionaires which you are flooding the country with. All right? That is why Singapore has one of the highest GDP per capita in the world. It is not because of the common people that they are wealthy and all that. No, the average Singaporean is not wealthy. He's struggling. Yeah? That is wrong. So I come back to the budget and the construct of it. What do we want to do with this budget? And as you have rightly put it, how do you allocate resources? I would allocate a large part of the resources to developing my human capital, the Singaporean talent. All right. You know, in the 80s, when I was growing up, and I'm very much part of the society Lee Kuan Yew built up, I used to listen to him every year when he did his National Day rally. And there the emphasis was always on the human potential of the Singaporean, because he used to tell us that was all we had. And we built up an incredible country. We built up an incredible society. You know, I may be an opponent to Lee Kuan Yew's party now, but I give him his dues. He did build up an incredible society. And in the 80s, I always tell people I think that was the best time in Singapore's history, in recent history. We were a developing country. We were the envy of Asia. You know, things worked as he liked to boast. All right. Not so many things work these days, including MRTs and all that. Yeah. And we did that using Singaporean talent. We did not emphasize so much on foreign talent. All right. Foreign talent became a vogue at the turn of the century because of globalization. All these people who said, you must welcome people from all over the countries and all that, then they will make you strong. To a certain extent, yes. But it cannot be at the sacrifice of your own people. So my main point here, Joel, is I am going to use that budget to develop the Singapore talent because I believe in the Singapore talent.
All right. I mean, I guess the reason why I did ask that was because, when you first came up with the free education proposal, like it clearly got a lot of online traction and a lot of people talking about it. And then I did see some memes that were just saying, where did the money come from? So I guess I just wanted to clarify like how the allocation would be. Do you think there are things where we can spend less on as a country?
I think that is a beautiful question, Joel. Let me answer it this way. The other thing PA wants to do is to normalize Singapore society. All right. What do I mean by normalizing Singapore society? One of the greatest follies of Lee Kuan Yew was first to elevate this political class and to elevate the salaries of the political class and to peg it to the top earners in the private sector. That, to me, was the biggest folly he ever made. And so today you have ministers making millions, all right? You have a position called the mayor that earns $660,000 a year, 3.3 million over a 5-year term. And many Singaporeans are scratching their heads and saying, what does a mayor actually do? They can't think of a single thing that the mayor does that an MP or other civil servants, cannot do. All right. And as a result, a political class has grown up that is totally insensitive to the struggles and the needs of the common Singaporean. Yeah. And that is why, in the last few years, you have seen disastrous policies like the GST hikes. To that normal Singaporean, it means a world of difference whether he's paying $3.50 or $4 or $4.50 for that bowl of bak chor mee. Yeah. But to the politicians, it means nothing, right? It means absolutely nothing. And we have the PAP have created that problem, haven't they? Because, now there is a divide between the political class and the common man. All right? The PAP will tell you, oh, no, we are always in touch. Well, if you're in touch, your policies say otherwise. Okay? And then the best evidence is when you catch a minister off guard, and then he or she puts out a statement which shows how distant she is. Like Grace Fu saying, well, if people can pay $18 or $20 for pasta, why can't they go and pay $5 for a wonton mee? All right? Yeah, but many people treat an $18 or $20 pasta as a treat, as a special treat. They don't do it every day. You may do it every day. You may have it for breakfast. But for that person who has to rely on the wonton mee or the bak chor mee, from a $4.50 to a $5 means a huge thing. All right? So we want to normalize it. The first thing we do, Joel, and this started from the time when PV came out. People always say you have to cut political salaries. I say absolutely. And I will not just slash 10 or 20% off. I will slash 70% off, 70% of the Prime Minister's salary of 2.2 million. All right? And you know what? Even after slashing 70% of 2.2 million, he is still the highest paid politician in the world. He is still the highest. And I hope Singaporeans realize how ridiculously overpaid our politicians have become. The first thing we will advocate for, we will get rid of the mayor's position because it is an unconscionable position. If I am offered the mayor's job, I actually will refuse it because I will not know what I am contributing for $660,000 a year.
Okay. And well, I do want to ask, for the rest of the party, who exactly are you attracting into the party and what do you look out for?
The PAR's candidates are not elitist. The PAR's candidates are very down-to-earth common Singaporeans. And that is our concentration. You are not going to find scholars. You are not going to find highly paid people in PAR's candidates. Like you, they may have struggles in life. Like you, they may have had difficulties in the past. All right? But every Singaporean, if he has the heart, deserves to be in politics. There is no such thing that, you are not so educated, so you shouldn't participate in politics. That is complete rubbish. So I am actively looking for ordinary Singaporeans who know what other common Singaporeans go through every day.
Have we actually talked about the PAR's slogan? Is there one that has been released yet?
Yes. Our slogan for this campaign is Take Back What Belongs to You. And it gels very much with what I have been telling you about. I think that for too many years now, that Singaporean citizen has lost a lot under the PAP government.
Okay. And where can young voters go to find out more about the PAR and its policies and whatnot?
Go to our Facebook, which, is our most popular medium. Come to my Facebook because, it is very closely followed by many people. Go to our website, which is increasingly being populated for the general election. We are on X as well. And, as the election nears, we will be increasingly on TikTok and other things. And social media is going to be increasingly important for us, Joel, because I'll tell you this. I have never been a fan of the mainstream media. I tolerate them. I mean, they ask to come to our walkabouts and all that, but they are not there to do us any favors. They are always out there to put us in a bad light. So I'm not a big fan of the MSM. All right, I'm not like other parties who are like dying for attention from the MSM. But I think social media is the way forward for us, and I am so happy and delighted that I'm doing this program with you today.
Thank you. Well, for many of us, it will also be the first time that there will be rallies this election. Can we expect a rally from the PAR? And if there is one, like what can we look forward to?
We will definitely have rallies. That was absent in 2020 because of COVID. I'm sure most of the parties will have rallies. PAR will have a series of rallies. We may have 4 or 5. We will not have them every day, but maybe every other day because we are contesting in 7 constituencies. So we intend to go around the constituencies where we are contesting. At these rallies, we hope that every one of our 14 candidates will be able to speak and, let Singaporeans know who they are. We want them to tell their story of how they are common Singaporeans who have decided to take the plunge to come up to the political stage and to represent the common man.
So I guess I don't want you to pick favorites, but I guess what I want to ask is, are there candidates that you will be fielding that young people should maybe find out more about?
As I say, we have a multitude of candidates across all age range, all right? I am not favoring anyone, but if I were to ask you to pay attention, pay attention to SK Chu from PV, all right? I mean, SK Chu is an incredibly talented man. He is a freelance tutor, but he has been spending his time interviewing hard-pressed people. And he did a TikTok video not long ago where he interviewed a platform worker. And that TikTok video just went viral, So he has concerns there. He wants to uplift that group of people, all right? I ask you to pay attention also to Vic. I call her Vic for short because she has got a very long name, whom I introduced yesterday. She is an early childhood educator, has spent all her life, working in childcare, and is now currently doing a master's in special needs education and all that from an Australian university. And she has given us such great ideas about what young parents are concerned about, when it comes to infant childcare, infant nursery, and things like that. So, yes, these are just 2 of the examples I ask your viewers to look at.
My second last question to you is this. What would Singapore stand to gain if the PAR is in Parliament?
I think there are very important matters which Singaporeans will stand to gain if PAR is elected into Parliament in this election. The first thing is, I think PAR will reinstill in Singaporeans a feeling of value in citizenship. So many Singaporeans today feel that they are second-class citizens in their own country. All right, they're almost like refugees in the job market. All right, that must be totally gotten rid of. I have been very vocal in this. The primary responsibility of every government is to take care of the welfare of the citizen. All right. The PAP, their supporters and their lackeys will brand me as racist, xenophobic, nativist. I don't care. At the end of the day, if I am the Prime Minister, my primary responsibility is to my citizens. My responsibility is not to find a job for that foreigner, all right, or to bring his family into Singapore so that they can enjoy a better life. That is not my responsibility. But I will have a great responsibility to that Singaporean young parent or any parent to make sure that they enjoy a higher standard of living. And tied in with this is also a very important issue. And it is something that I am saddened about. You know, Lawrence Wong, for all his talk, nonsense really, about Forward Singapore, is bringing Singapore backwards. All right? I mean, the young viewers of your program today, their parents dreamt of the 5 C's. All right? I mean, public housing was affordable. All right? They could dream of upgrading to a condominium. They wanted a country club. They wanted a car. They wanted cash or other things. Today, that car is out of reach for the great majority of young Singaporeans. Okay. Public housing is increasingly unaffordable. All right. And Lawrence Wong tells you to redefine success, but it is nebulous. It is amorphous. Okay. And I asked the young Singaporean to look around and ask himself this question. Is he better off today than what his parents had in their time? The answer clearly is no.
Actually, Mr. Lim, earlier on when you said that there were calls that perhaps you were like racist or xenophobic, okay, just to share with you, I was actually doing another show, another podcast, and I was a guest, and then your name came up, and one of the other hosts said that she's a bit hesitant because of the post that you made with regards to a little girl, on the banner,
The Vietnamese girl.
So maybe what I wanted to clarify was, I guess, okay, actually that host, she was also pro Singapore interests, like Singaporean interests first, right? With regards to having foreigners come in and whatnot. But I guess where her hesitance was in the way, these attitudes are being expressed. So maybe you could clarify that as well. Like, 'cause she felt like, you were being maybe a bit harsh on a little girl. Yeah.
I made that post. Why did I make that post? I made that post when someone brought it to my attention that the girl in the post, I mean, she was a lovely girl, all right, lovely girl, don't get me wrong, that she was not Singaporean. And that banner was for the purpose of National Day. Now, Joel, I welcome foreigners, but as you know by now, I think that the incredibly huge numbers that are being brought in is bad for the country. But I think for such a significant day as National Day, which is very much tied up to the Singaporean identity, no matter how attractive that little girl was, it was wrong to have put her on that poster. Why couldn't you have found a Singaporean girl, all right, to have put it there? Because that is a representation, again, of our identity, of our citizenship. I was not attacking that girl. I was just attacking the notion, which the PAP are playing, fast and loose with, that anyone can be considered a local. And that is what they have been doing, because now PRs are also being considered as locals. And it skews the entire employment figures totally. All right, PRs are allowed to buy HDB resale flats. And that is what has bumped up the HDB resale prices. All right. So my concern and interest at the end of the day is always about that Singaporean citizen, that Singaporean identity. I hope I've answered you.
Yes, you have. All right, my final question for you is this. Why should young voters consider supporting or voting for the People's Alliance for Reform?
Thank you. I would ask your young voters to support PAR for this reason. If the PAP policies are allowed to go on, and if they are unchecked, and if they are again returned with a supermajority, you are going to find life increasingly difficult for you in the coming years, like the GST hikes, like unaffordable housing, like job insecurity. The best safeguard you have is with a strong opposition in Parliament opposing these outrageous policies. And here I want to say something as well. You need to have very outspoken opposition politicians. I'm not beating my own drum, but like myself, who dare to take on the PAP, who dare to challenge them. I have one criticism of the current Singapore opposition, and it is that they are too deferential. They're too timid. All right? I won't go around addressing the ministers as, minister this, minister that. I'll just call them by name. Yeah. Because, you are equal in parliament. You should be able to debate policies equally. Yeah. You need that safeguard. To me, it is absolutely foolish if you keep voting for the status quo. Singaporeans in this election are an angry lot. I have never seen the mood so ugly on the ground. Yeah. And it cuts across all age groups. I was in Jalan Besar 2 weeks ago. I tell you, I saw in the coffee shops the seniors who mocked me, how angry they were. So this is your chance. And the other thing, as I repeatedly say again, is we must take back what we have lost over the years.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Lim. I wish you all the best in these general elections.
Joel, thank you so much for inviting me to your program again. It's been delightful. I had a great hour with you and your audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Mr. Lim Tean for joining us on today's episode. I hope this episode gave you a deeper understanding of PAR. As we mentioned, this is part of our special series spotlighting political parties in Singapore. Be sure to check out the rest of our episodes as well. If you appreciate the work that we're doing, show us some love by following us on Spotify and subscribing on YouTube. Go binge the other episodes now. Bye!